Nobody panics when you say you're working on Christmas. Nobody gasps when you say you're traveling. But say you're spending it alone, and the room changes. Eyes widen like you just confessed to something contagious. Voices soften into that careful tone people use when they don't know what to do with your reality. They start offering solutions you didn't ask for, a last-minute invitation, a pity text, a question that's pretending to be concerned. Are you okay? And here's the part they don't understand: Christmas alone isn't automatically a tragedy. For some of us, it's the first day all year when our bodies stop bracing. People imagine I'm staring at my phone, doom-scrolling perfect family photos, collapsing into loneliness. They picture me eating cold takeout with the curtains shut, crying at a holiday movie I didn't even choose. They picture me missing something. What they never picture is relief. Not dramatic relief, quiet relief. The kind that feels like finally setting down a heavy bag you forgot you were carrying. Because the truth is, the loneliest Christmases of my life didn't happen in an empty apartment. They happened in crowded rooms. They happened at tables where my name was present but my person wasn't. They happened when I smiled so hard my face hurt while my nervous system searched for exits. So when I say I'm alone this year, what I mean is, I'm not performing this year. And if you're watching this, maybe you know exactly what that means. Maybe your body starts reacting in early December: tight shoulders, jaw clenching, sleep turning shallow. Maybe you feel the dread before you can explain why. Maybe you rehearse conversations you don't want to have. Maybe you prepare to be misunderstood like it's a holiday tradition. That's not being dramatic. That's your body remembering patterns. This isn't a video about hating your family. It's not a cut everyone off lecture. It's not a fantasy where boundaries erase grief. This is the psychology of what happens when a young man finally stops pretending that obligation is the same thing as connection. And I want to start with something uncomfortable. Sometimes the safest place you can be on Christmas is the place people judge the most. Sometimes alone is not abandonment. Sometimes alone is rescue. Because not every home is a place where you can rest. Some homes are places where you must shrink. Some homes are places where you must predict moods. Some homes are places where your emotions become an inconvenience. So the first question isn't why are you alone? The first question is, what did being together cost you? If you've never lived this, you might think I'm exaggerating. But if you have, you know it's not about one big moment. It's about 1,000 small ones. The kind of small moments that teach a kid to disappear politely. The kind of small moments that turn holidays into endurance tests. So let me take you back, not for drama, for clarity. Because the adult choice to spend Christmas alone usually starts in childhood, when you learn what attention feels like, what safety feels like, and what love requires you to trade away. And if your chest tightens hearing this, that's not weakness. That's recognition. Your body is saying, yes, this is the story. I was 8, sitting at a table that felt way too big. All around me, adults were laughing at jokes that flew right over my head. I had a sentence ready, something simple and excited, because it doesn't take much for a kid to feel wonder. I opened my mouth to share it, and an adult just talked right over me, like my voice was just background noise. So, I waited. I tried again, interrupted again. And that's when I learned the first rule of my family's holidays: speak softly enough that no one has to notice you. That's how hypervigilance starts. It's not fear, not at first. It's a strategy. You stop trying to compete for attention and you start studying the room. You learn which tone of voice means safe, and which one means criticism is coming. You learn which silence means something is about to explode. A kid becomes a weather app for adults who refuse to manage their own storms. At 10, people started praising me for being mature. They said it like it was a compliment, but what they really meant was, thank you for not having needs. My maturity wasn't about growth, it was about adaptation. By 12, the gifts started to reveal something. Not about their price, but about their accuracy. I remember unwrapping a present that was technically a gift, but it felt like it was for a stranger. The kind of thing you buy when you know someone's name, but not what's in their mind. I smiled anyway, because making them uncomfortable felt way more dangerous than just swallowing my own disappointment. That's a strange lesson for a kid to learn. Your honesty is risky. Your gratitude has to be a performance. Your disappointment must be invisible. So you get really good at acting grateful while feeling completely unseen. And people reward you for it. They call you easy. But easy doesn't mean happy. Easy means you've been trained. By the time I was 14, I could predict the holiday script. The questions always came right after the food, like clockwork. How's school? Not because they were curious, but as an evaluation. What are you going to do with your life? Not as support, but as pressure. If you answered honestly, you were too sensitive. If you answered briefly, you were distant. So you learned the third option: perform a version of yourself that doesn't need any follow-up questions. At 15, Christmas Eve wasn't cozy. It was tense. I could hear raised voices through the walls. I could feel the temperature of the house drop, even while the Christmas tree lights were blinking happily. That contrast, so pretty on the outside, but so unsafe on the inside, teaches your nervous system a brutal lesson: celebration can be camouflage. So I started wrapping gifts late at night, not because I loved doing it, but because it was something I could control. The tape, the paper, the corners, the symmetry. Control becomes a coping skill when emotional safety isn't guaranteed. Sometimes I wasn't the kid at Christmas, I was staff. I was the assistant to the adults' moods. I was the one who smoothed over conversations, changed the subject, told a joke at just the right moment, complimented food I didn't even like, and laughed at stories I'd heard 100 times. That's emotional labor, and kids shouldn't have to do it. The thing about being the peacekeeper child is that you don't learn how to relax. You learn how to monitor. You learn how to anticipate. You learn how to prevent. And for a while, prevention feels like love. Until you realize love was supposed to protect you, too. By 16, I could sense a shift in the room before anyone even spoke. A slight change in posture, a pause that lasted 1 second too long. A joke that landed wrong, a glass poured just a little too full. My body would tense up, like a firefighter hearing a distant alarm. This is the invisible trauma people don't like to talk about. It's not bruises or big headlines. It's just the slow pileup of moments that teach you, be smaller to stay safe, and on Christmas, that lesson just repeats with extra glitter. So when someone says, but they gave you a roof over your head, food, gifts, I get what they mean. They mean, be grateful for the material proof, but your nervous system isn't convinced by receipts. It only believes in consistency, curiosity, and safety. The child version of me didn't have a choice. I went where I was taken. I sat where I was placed. I performed because it kept the day calm, but the adult version of me, the adult version gets to ask a question I was never allowed to ask as a kid: what do I actually feel when I am there? And the answer wasn't joy, it was tightness. Tightness in my stomach, in my throat, in my chest. A body doesn't tighten around safety, a body tightens around a threat. So if you're someone who spends the holidays alone, I want you to hear this. Your choice didn't just come out of nowhere. It was built, it was conditioned, it was earned through years of learning what togetherness actually felt like in your family. And the hardest part is that from the outside, your family might look perfectly normal. There are smiles, photos, maybe even matching pajamas. But emotional absence doesn't show up in pictures, it shows up in your body. So the adult decision to stay away isn't rebellion, it's data. It's your nervous system submitting a report that says, this environment costs too much. People think you're avoiding loneliness by staying home. But you're not avoiding loneliness. You're avoiding a very specific kind of loneliness, the loneliness of being unseen while everyone is watching you. And that brings us to the part nobody teaches you. Your body remembers the holidays, not the date, the pattern. A week before Christmas, my sleep used to change. Not because I was excited, because I was preparing. My brain would run simulations at night, conversations, comments, little humiliations disguised as jokes. People call it overthinking, but when you grew up managing adults, it's not overthinking. It's forecasting. My shoulders would climb without permission, my jaw would lock while I brushed my teeth. Headaches would show up like unwanted guests. Your body doesn't do that for fun. It does that because it learned that holidays weren't rest, they were performance. Performance is exhausting because it requires you to split. One part of you smiles, another part of you monitors, another part of you negotiates, another part of you hides the truth so nobody gets uncomfortable. That's not celebration, that's labor. And the worst part is, people reward the performance. They say, see? You're fine. They mistake your survival skills for evidence that nothing was wrong. This is why some people feel guilty for skipping family holidays, because the mind says, it's not that bad, but the body says, I can't breathe there, and the body is usually telling the truth first. So when I finally stayed home one year, something happened that shocked me. Nothing collapsed, nothing exploded. The world didn't punish me. My body softened. I slept. I ate without commentary. I existed without auditioning for approval. And I remember thinking, is this what Christmas is supposed to feel like? Not fireworks, not forced joy, just a day that doesn't demand you betray yourself. That's the secret. Some people confuse peace with sadness because they've never experienced peace on holidays. When your baseline has been tension, calm feels unfamiliar, almost suspicious. But unfamiliar doesn't mean wrong. Unfamiliar can mean healed territory. Then the messages arrive. Merry Christmas, miss you. And on the surface, it's sweet. But in your body, it can feel like a hook, like an invitation back into the role. Not into connection, into obligation. Sometimes you don't reply because you're angry. Sometimes you don't reply because replying feels like stepping back onto the stage. Because even a polite response can trigger the old contract. Be the version of you that makes us comfortable. This is why people call you cold. They think silence means punishment. They don't understand silence can be protection. They don't see the years you spent speaking with no one truly listening. And yes, grief can still exist. You can be relieved and sad at the same time. You can miss the idea of family while recognizing the reality wasn't safe. Two truths can share the same body. Some people spend Christmas alone because they chose it. Some because they were excluded. Some because distance made it impossible. But the psychological experience often converges. When performance stops, the nervous system finally gets a vote. And that vote is usually, I want quiet. I want control of my boundaries. I want to be in a space where I'm not constantly translating myself. When you grew up in emotional unpredictability, you can become addicted to earning peace. You think peace is something you must buy with effort. But peace is supposed to be your default in a loving environment. That's why the first Christmas alone can feel like withdrawal. Not from people, from chaos. From role-playing, from hyper-awareness. Your body keeps checking. When does it start? When does it get tense? And then, it doesn't. And in that silence, you meet yourself without the family filter, without the be nice reflex. Without the reflex to minimize your feelings so no one gets upset. That meeting can be emotional. Because you realize how long you've lived without being fully accompanied even when surrounded. If you're spending Christmas alone, you're not necessarily failing. Sometimes you're finally refusing a counterfeit version of connection. And the moment you refuse counterfeit connection, you make room for real connection later. But first, you have to stop calling crumbs a feast. So what does Christmas alone look like for a young man like me? It's not glamorous, it's not dramatic. It's small things that feel huge when you've lived on performance for years. I wake up and my first thought isn't, how do I act today? My first thought is, what do I need today? I make breakfast slowly. I don't negotiate. I don't brace for comments. I don't translate my preferences into something acceptable. I eat like a person who deserves to take up space. Then I go outside, not to prove anything, just to feel the world without an audience. The cold air hits my face and it feels honest. Cold, but honest. Honesty is underrated. A lot of us grew up in houses where everything looked fine and felt wrong. So a quiet street on Christmas morning can feel like therapy without words. Later, I might write, not a gratitude list for social media. Not a performative look how healed I am, just a private inventory. What do I feel? What do I miss? What do I not miss? What am I finally allowed to admit? And here's what I admit. I don't miss being interrogated. I don't miss defending my life choices like they're on trial. I don't miss the jokes that were actually critiques. I don't miss the pressure to be easy. I don't miss holding the emotional temperature of the room. Some people will say, but that's just family. Family is hard. No, love can be effort. But love shouldn't require self-erasure. Love shouldn't demand that you become smaller to be tolerated. There's a difference between compromise and disappearance. Compromise says, we both matter. Disappearance says, only you matter, so I'll vanish. A lot of people confuse the two because they were taught to. And if you were the kid who vanished, Christmas becomes the annual reminder that you still know how. So staying home isn't selfish. It's a boundary your nervous system begged you to set for years. That boundary will trigger backlash. People who benefited from your performance will call your boundary attitude. People who enjoyed your compliance will call your growth distance. And they'll rarely ask the real question, what did it cost you to be that version of yourself? Because if they ask, they might have to see you clearly. Here's a hard truth. Some families prefer you manageable over you authentic. Manageable means predictable. Manageable means quiet. Manageable means you don't disrupt the story they tell about themselves. And when you stop playing your part, they call it betrayal. But it isn't betrayal to stop abandoning yourself, it's loyalty to your own life. So yes, I'm alone on Christmas, but for the first time in years, I'm not in danger of disappearing. And that's a very different kind of holiday. If you feel guilty, that makes sense. Guilt is part of the conditioning. Guilt is the leash that keeps you returning to places that hurt. But guilt is not always a moral signal. Sometimes guilt is just proof you've been trained. A healthy relationship can handle your honesty. A healthy relationship can handle your boundaries. If a relationship collapses the moment you stop performing, it wasn't held together by love, it was held together by your self-erasure. And maybe that's the scariest part, realizing you were the glue. Realizing you were the stabilizer. Realizing you were the one paying the emotional bill. So today I do something radical. I rest without earning it. I enjoy my own company without apologizing. I let the day be a day, not a test. And if you're alone too, I want you to know, you're allowed to build new rituals that don't hurt you. You're allowed to make the holiday smaller, softer, truer. Because sometimes the first step toward real connection is learning you can survive without counterfeit connection. And you can. Society sells Christmas like a final exam. If you're not surrounded by people, you're failing. But your life isn't a commercial, and real connection isn't measured by a head count. Some of the most connected people I know have very small circles. Some of the loneliest people I know host the biggest dinners. Because belonging isn't noise, belonging is being known. So if you find yourself alone, ask yourself something gentle. Do I feel safer right now than I would feel at that family table? If the answer is yes, that's not failure, that's information. And here's the part nobody tells you. When you stop trying to force connection where it doesn't exist, you protect the part of you that still believes real connection is possible. You stop numbing yourself. You stop settling for less. You stop calling endurance love. Maybe one day you'll build what people call a chosen family. People who don't require you to shrink to fit in. People who ask questions and actually wait for the answers. People who don't disguise criticism as concern, but a chosen family always begins with one powerful act, choosing yourself first. And if you're thinking, but I don't have anyone yet, I hear you. This isn't a fairy tale ending, it's a turning point. The turning point is when you stop volunteering for emotional abandonment. Some people will never understand. They'll call you dramatic. They'll call you unforgiving. They might even call you selfish. But those words often just translate to, your boundary is making me look at my own behavior. And a lot of people hate looking in the mirror. And if forgiveness is part of your journey, it won't be because someone demanded it. Forgiveness that is demanded isn't healing. Forgiveness that is rushed is just another form of self-betrayal. True healing happens at the speed of safety. So, what do you do today? You do one small thing that treats you like someone worth caring for. Make a real meal, just for you. Go for a walk. Take a long, warm shower. Write a page in a journal that tells the absolute truth. Not for an audience, not for content, just for you. You let the loneliness, if it shows up, be honest. Because honest loneliness is still less damaging than feeling invisible in a crowded room. At least when you're alone, you don't have to disappear just to survive. And then you remember this, a boundary is not a wall, it's a door with a lock. It's you deciding who gets access to your life, your energy, your body, and your peace. People who truly love you will be curious, not offended. They'll ask, what changed, and actually mean it. They will ask, what do you need, and they will stay for the answer. They will make room for your humanity, not just for your compliance. And if your family can't do that today, it doesn't mean you're unlovable. It just means they have limitations. And you are allowed to stop paying for their limitations with your own mental health. So yes, maybe I'm alone on Christmas, but I'm not begging for crumbs of affection. I'm not rehearsing my answers to loaded questions. I'm not bracing for jokes that sting. I'm not monitoring everyone's moods. I'm not shrinking myself down. I'm breathing. And that might be the most spiritual thing a person can do on a holiday. Just let the body finally believe it as safe. If you needed permission to choose peace today, this is it. You're not broken for protecting yourself. You're not cold for refusing to perform. You are not failing at Christmas. You are learning the crucial difference between connection and obligation. And maybe next year looks different. Maybe you'll share the day with one close friend. Maybe you'll volunteer somewhere. Maybe you'll travel. Or maybe you'll still choose to stay home. The point isn't the setting. The point is you don't abandon yourself just to make the holiday look right. Because the real tragedy was never being alone on December 25th. The real tragedy was learning to become invisible just to keep the peace. And today, you can stop practicing that skill. So if you're alone right now, just place a hand on your chest and feel the difference. Not the sadness you were told to expect, but the quiet your body has been craving. This isn't the absence of love, this is the presence of self-respect. And for a lot of people, that is the first honest Christmas they've ever had. If this resonated with you, consider subscribing for more content on healing and finding your way back to yourself. Take care.